guys, it's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today, the social media embargo for Superman has officially been released, which means it's officially time for those of us who have not gotten to see the movie early to stay off of the internet for the next couple of days if you don't want it spoiled to you. But that being said, because I personally have not gotten a chance to see Superman and all of these reviews and everything are coming out, I want to go ahead and make one video with all of my final predictions here. I do want to go ahead and say in the thumbnail for this post, I'm going to have like cameos and stuff like that. That is the first group of things we're going to be talking about. And I do want to say, as somebody who is a huge fan of James Gunn, I don't think he needs any of the flashy stuff like cameos or anything like that to get people interested into this movie. So I do think that there are potentially going to be some cameos, but I think for the most part what I'm going to be talking about here is references to other characters if they exist in the universe or not, because something that I think is really fascinating about this movie in particular with other superhero movies that have come out in the past 5-6 years, this movie is completely starting off a new cinematic universe, and James Gunn decided to announce when he was talking about this movie that this is a world where metahumans have been a thing for at least 300 years, and they are very used to superheroes just kind of roaming the streets, and that leads to a very interesting thing of, well, if we're just, diving right into this cinematic universe that's already established, what characters already are established? Who has Superman potentially had connections with or already interacted with in this universe? I think it's going to be really interesting, and I personally have a lot of thoughts. So, like I said, we're going to start off with all the cameos and then kind of get into the people who I think will be referenced, at least, if they don't actually physically show up. And then we're going to go from there onto if I think anybody is going to die in this movie, and then just some of my final predictions after that. Okay, so to talk about cameos, I obviously want to talk about some of the characters who are confirmed for this movie. There seems to be a huge array of supporting cast. I mean, with everybody who works at the Daily Planet with Superman, and with the Justice Gang, the group of people with Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, the Mr. Terrific. That's an interesting team right there. That's some other superheroes that Superman's obviously going to be interacting with. And obviously they are funded by Maxwell Lord, who's going to be played by Sean Gunn. And he, in the comics, is kind of an anti-hero, but more often than not, he's on the villainous side of things. But I do think in a movie like this, where Lex Luthor is clearly the villain of this film, that there's a solid chance that Maxwell Lord is kind of going to be like the lesser of two evils in this movie. I think that he's somebody who's funding these heroes to go out and, protect certain people and do certain things. And I think that for the most part, he's obviously controlling what these superheroes can and cannot interfere with. But I do think that in the third act, there's going to be a big moment where Maxwell Lord is like, yeah, go help Superman out. So I think that that'll be interesting. I think that obviously with those characters being confirmed, it brings up other characters who potentially might be confirmed as well. But to talk about other characters that are confirmed, I do want to talk about one cameo that I thought would have been awesome to leave as a surprise, but James Gunn did officially say in an interview that this is a thing that's happening. It's something that's kind of long been rumored, but the actor from Guardians of the Galaxy, one of the first Guardians of the Galaxy actors to be confirmed to be working in the DCU with James Gunn, we have Bradley Cooper is going to be doing a proper cameo as Jor-El, aka, Superman's biological father in this movie. And I really wish that was something that did not get spoiled. I really wish that was something that James Gunn did not say in the press leading up to the film, because as somebody who loves Bradley Cooper and loves all the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, in my opinion, they're like 3 of the best Marvel movies ever made. I really think that would have been such a sweet moment to see on the big screen for the first time. However, I do think that, it'll still probably get a big pop. I think that I personally am going to really love it. Big other superhero fans will probably also enjoy that. And as somebody who I really love the movie Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, that came out a couple years ago, and Bradley Cooper did a cameo in there, and I think he's the kind of actor when he shows up in things, people are like, oh my god, that's Bradley Cooper, that's kind of cool. And so I do think that would have been really nice to not have spoiled. But that being said, those are kind of the confirmed ones. Now to get into some more speculative ones, starting off with Supergirl, Millie Alcock herself. They're currently filming at this movie, I believe. They're probably getting close to the end of production here, and Millie Alcock has been long rumored to be in this movie. And it's actually really weird because a couple of months ago, people were saying like, yeah, 100% confirmed, she's definitely in the movie. And then like James Gunn kind of made some comments like, where did you guys get that idea from? Like, she has not even been suited up. We haven't really done anything with her filming wise because that was before they began production. And so now it's really like on the fence of like, is she going to be in this? Is she not? I do think she's going to be one of the post-credit scenes. James Gunn confirmed that there are going to be 2 post-credit scenes in this movie, and I think one of them is definitely going to be setting up Supergirl, and then the other one's probably going to do something with the Peacemaker side of the universe. So I think that whether or not she shows up before the credits, I don't think so, but at the very end, I think that she will be in the credits at least. Okay, and then for the other post-credit scene, I obviously think that there's going to be potentially two other big cameos that could potentially happen here. Like I said, I think it's going to be setting up kind of the Peacemaker side of the world, and there's two ways that I think they could go about doing this. One, kind of doing more of like a jokey post-credit scene with Peacemaker, and it could be like an extended scene from the Peacemaker Season 2 trailer where he's being interviewed by the Justice Gang and they're kind of making fun of him. I could see it being like a 2-minute long version of that scene that's really played out, and that's just 100% comedic chops. Or something that I think is really interesting is in that post-credit scene, it's Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl and Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner with Maxwell Lord, and they're interviewing people to potentially join the Justice Gang. But something that seems to be really interesting about it, Mr. Terrific is not there. And I do think that there's a solid chance that by the end of this movie, Mr. Terrific is kind of going to see things from Superman's point of view and be like, you know what, yeah, why am I being a little hero for hire? Why don't I go out and save people just to do it because that's the right thing to do? So I could see this movie ending with Mr. Terrific leaving that Justice Gang, and that's why they're currently doing auditions to get their third member, and that's where they stumble across Peacemaker. And then so we could either have a post-credit scene that's with Peacemaker, or what does Mr. Terrific go and do? And my theory for what Mr. Terrific is going to do is he's going to be teaming up with Amanda Waller, and we get a huge Viola Davis cameo. I think that'd be absolutely cool. I think that'd be really interesting because for people who do not know, in Creature Commandos and in season 1 of Peacemaker, they kind of set it up that Amanda Waller is going to be losing her job. And forever ago, when James Gunn announced the slate for all of the projects and TV shows that are going to be in his first phase with the Gods and Monsters slate, he kind of set it up that there was going to be a Waller TV show. And that was a little weird because Waller's obviously from Suicide Squad, right? But we have Creature Commandos, that's kind of like the new Suicide Squad. We have Peacemaker, which is like a spin-off of Suicide Squad. What does Amanda Waller have to offer that those two TV shows don't already have to offer? And I think that a lot of people were kind of speculating that obviously you want to put a big-name actress onto a project like this to kind of get like people who are funding things and try to get, you know, the business side of people to be like, okay, yeah, this is something we can greenlit. So obviously Viola Davis, one of the best actors working nowadays, and to have her name on a project is really good, but a Waller show on its own is very questionable. It doesn't necessarily seem like something that could stick on its own. So I wouldn't have been surprised if that was a filler name for the actual project, which would be The Terrifics. And what I'm speculating here is that Viola Davis and Mr. Terrific have a scene together where they're putting together a new team that's going to be the Terrifics team, setting up either a Terrifics movie or a Terrifics TV show. And the reason I think that this would be very plausible is because before James Gunn fully rebooted, Amanda Waller had multiple teams. She had the Creature Commandos, she had Suicide Squad, she had the Justice Society, which she was basically in charge of. And Amanda Waller being in charge of the Justice Society made a lot of sense. And I could see her totally being in charge of a new team in this DCU, which would make sense for it to be like the Terrifics, who I think is a really cool team, underutilized in the comics, some team that isn't super famous. And with some of the early reviews coming out saying Mr. Terrific is one of the best characters in the movie, him getting his own movie where he's kind of the leader of a new team would be epic. So those are my predictions for people that will actually physically show up. Now let's talk about people who I think will at least be referenced. Okay, so for starters, if we're talking about people that are going to be referenced, we got to talk about the biggest character, of course, the Caped Crusader, Batman himself. I don't think he's going to be referenced in this movie, but I do think, if anything, there might be a one-off line where either Guy Gardner or Mr. Terrific is talking about how childish and immature Superman is being, and there's like a one-off line where they're like, well, it could be worse. It's not like they have a team of children fighting out in the, you know, Gotham City or something like that, and just kind of poking fun at the fact that Batman has his little team of child sidekicks with all the Robins running around. I think that that's the only way they would reference Batman in this. Batman doesn't really make sense to show up in this. It doesn't really make sense for him to be referenced. He lives in Gotham, and even if they're doing the Twin Cities thing where like Gotham is New Jersey and one is New York, it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to be referenced here. There's already a lot going on in this movie. I feel like I love Batman, and I'm really excited to see him. But because they were still having a really hard time figuring out if they're doing their own Batman or if they're going to tie in Matt Reeves' Batman, I think it's very smart for them to just not mention him at all. So that's my thoughts for Batman. But to talk about some other characters I think would be cool to talk about, obviously we have one Green Lantern. I would not be surprised if we get a reference or even a name drop to maybe somebody like Alan Scott. I think that it would be really cool if, you know, Guy Gardner talks about one of his mentors, or if he talks about other young prodigies that he's worked with, like Hal Jordan, potentially. And I think that it's very much a big possibility that they'll name drop another Green Lantern. Whether or not any of them show up in the movie, I seriously doubt they will, but I do think that that's something that's definitely on the playing field. And then another character who lives in... Why am I blanking on the name of Superman City? I literally just said it too, didn't I? Because I keep wanting to say Krypton, and that's absolutely incorrect. But another character who lives in Metropolis who would be relatively interesting to see show up in this, or at least be mentioned, Black Lightning. I don't think James Gunn has mentioned any plans for Black Lightning whatsoever. I genuinely am just saying this because I think Black Lightning is a really cool character, and I think that he's someone who, like in the CW show for him, works really well as like a veteran character, somebody who's been around and has been doing it for a really long time. So if Black Lightning gets mentioned, like one-off in one of the montages where like Superman's talking about all the superheroes in the city or something, I think that that'd be really cool. I think that that'd be a fun nod, and a lot of people would like that. But those are pretty much all the characters that I think might be mentioned. In Creature Commandos, they did kind of tease Themyscira, so I wouldn't be that shocked if they do have like a little news clip or something at some point in the background that talks about a mysterious island of all women or something, because that definitely seems to be something that James Gunn is trying to plant the seeds for. But that being said, they haven't casted a Wonder Woman. They haven't said really how far into development any Wonder Woman related projects are. So I am going to play it safe. I genuinely just think that if there's going to be references to other characters, it's going to be characters like Alan Scott, Hal Jordan, John Stewart, maybe Kilowog, something like that, one of the Green Lanterns. And like I said, a character who lives in Metropolis like Black Lightning. They could also potentially mention the Flash. I doubt it, but I think he's really cool, and I want the Flash to show up ASAP, because God, we need to have a good Flash movie. How the hell is it 2025 and we have not had a single good Flash movie, guys? Let's get on it. But that being said, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about when it comes to cameos, when it comes to references, when it comes to little Easter eggs. Now to talk about the big question that is on everybody's mind when it comes to these trailers, this movie, what's happening. And the question is, who is Ultraman? For some reason, in the marketing of this film, I don't even think it was necessarily intentional, but everybody who is everybody has been speculating on who's the man behind this mask. I've seen so many insane theories. I've seen people who are like, oh, well, there's this one comic book run where Doomsday is wearing a containment suit, and he kind of looks like this one shot of Ultraman, so clearly it's going to be Doomsday. And I will say, for the people who are making that theory, I love how bold you are. I don't think James Gunn is dumb enough to introduce Lex Luthor in a movie after the last time we had Lex Luthor introduced in a new movie where his plan was make Doomsday in that, and then immediately take this Lex Luthor and have the first thing he does be make Doomsday. I love it. I think that Doomsday is an insanely cool character, but I feel like it is way too early on into Superman's journey for them to be doing that. And I honestly feel like he wants to separate this Lex Luthor as much as possible from Jesse Eisenberg's. No offense to Jesse Eisenberg. I genuinely don't think it's his fault that Lex Luthor sucked. I see the vision that they were going for. He just was not directed right. But that being said, I think that the people who are thinking that's Doomsday, he looks too human. He's too small. It doesn't make sense for that to be Doomsday. There are two characters who I personally would want it to be. I am going to go ahead and say right off the bat, I don't think it's Bizarro. A lot of people are like, oh, it's going to be Bizarro. He's going to be played by Henry Cavill. I don't see it happening. I think that, one, putting Henry Cavill in this movie in any degree is just going to piss off people who are already mad that he's not Superman. And for two, I think that I don't necessarily think Henry Cavill would do it. Like, I don't think he has bad blood with James Gunn, but I definitely think that he wants to step away from that project because he was away from that project and then finally he got roped back in just to immediately be cut off. I think that he doesn't want anything to do with Superman for the time being, and him showing up in this movie for a couple seconds doesn't really seem worth his time. I've seen other people say, oh, well, if it's a clone of Superman, it's going to be played by David Cordsweet. I don't necessarily think so, but the two characters I think it potentially could be, I'm going to talk about the one that's least likely first, but Apollo from the authorities. For people who do not remember, when James Gunn released his announcement of all the different movies and projects he had, probably the most out there project was The Authority, who's a very interesting comic book team. They're very, very almost villainous in a sense. They're kind of evil, almost. They have way too much power, and they let the power come to their head. And it definitely seems like a very James Gunn project to do. And when he originally announced it, it was supposed to be like the next movie after Superman. Like, it was supposed to happen right after Superman. There was a lot of like speculation that it was going to take place around the same time as Superman, and Superman was going to be in both movies. And since that announcement, we have the engineer, who is one of the main Authority team members there in this movie. And then we have Apollo, who's a character who essentially has all the same superpowers as Superman and has long hair. And we have the mysterious shot of Ultraman where he has his mask off and he has long hair. And Ultraman seems to have all the same powers as Superman. It would be really, really cool if this is an Apollo from the Authority, and for whatever reason he's just wearing a black suit. Because maybe Lex Luthor took them out of whatever dimension they came from, because in the comics they come from another dimension, another world, wherever. And it'd be interesting if, Lex Luthor kind of pretended like he saved them from this other dimension, and now he's kind of making them work for him because the engineer and Apollo both working together, working under Lex Luthor. Seems like an interesting thing that could happen. But that being said, I think that would be really far out there. That would be a really huge stretch. And it's one of those things where it's like, unless you know everything about comic books, that reveal is going to make no sense to you. So I'm going to say my other theory on who I think it is, and it is a character named Parasite. So Parasite in the comics is a very big purple kind of monster guy, but in this movie, the reason why Ultraman is covered from head to toe is probably because he's not human, but Lex Luthor wants him to look like a human character so that people feel safe around him. For people who see him fighting against Superman, don't think, oh my god, there's a giant monster fighting against Superman. They want it to be like, hey, there's this cool superhero who works for Lex Luthor. And I kind of could see it being a thing in this movie that, like, since Maxwell Lord has a team of superheroes, people will see the people who are working for Lex Luthor and be like, well, yeah, they're superheroes too. And so Ultraman potentially being seen as a superhero figure, it would look kind of bad if he was like this big purple monster. But all of the toys that we've seen around the Ultraman character have a heavy emphasis on the fact that he's purple. And I think that that's not by mistake. I think that it's going to be totally intentional. I think that it's going to get to a point where he expands out of the suit. And that's why we see like this scene with him with the really long flowing hair. And something that's interesting about Parasite in the comics is he kind of absorbs the powers of the people around him. And there's a lot of sequences where him and Superman are literally touching and getting really close together. And I think that part of the reason for that is because he needs to be holding or touching Superman to absorb those powers and potentially get the same powers as Superman. That's probably why he has the exact power set as Superman. And there's a lot of toys that show Superman having like ice bricks for fist. And I think once Superman figures out, oh, this guy's absorbing my powers, he's going to need a way to fight him without using his powers directly. And that's probably how he's going to take him out. So that's my theory. I think it's going to be Parasite. I think that a lot of people on the internet have already speculated on that and have guessed that. And I do think that that's something that's going to happen in the movie. And I don't think it's going to be as huge of a mystery. Like, I think that it's going to be one of those things where he breaks out of his costume and nobody's going to be like, oh my god, look, it's Henry Cavill. Because, like I said, I don't think James Gunn needs to do anything flashy or cool like that to make a good movie. But yeah, that being said, we've got one last little bit of speculation to do. Is anybody going to die in this movie? I'm going to go ahead and say it. No. I don't think that they need to kill anybody off in this movie. I do think that with a lot of people saying that this movie is very like fast-paced and they're throwing everything at you and the movie feels overstuffed, a lot of people have also said that this movie doesn't feel like it has any emotional weight to it. So I do kind of have the benefit of hindsight of having seen one singular review for this movie and them saying that it doesn't feel very emotional. I don't think that in the first movie in your brand new cinematic universe, you're going to want to kill off characters. Like, I understand some people are like, oh, but his parents, what about them? They're regular human beings, and if Lex Luthor's really that mad at him, maybe he'll go kill his parents. They live on a farm in Kansas. I feel like they're not going to live that close to Metropolis that it's really even something that's up for debate or even for question. I think they're going to be safe. Will, Crypto get killed? They want to really show off how evil Lex Luthor is, kill the goddamn dog, and I come after you, James Gunn. Sorry. That was a threat. I didn't mean to do that. That's my bad. My apologies. But, that being said, I don't think they're going to kill off Crypto, obviously. I think the closest thing we'll get to a death scene in this movie is one of Superman's Superman robots, voiced by Alan Tudyk. I think it's Robot number 4, something like that. Superbot number 4, something like that. I think he's going to die, and it's going to be a very emotional thing, and, you know, Superman's going to cry and be very, very upset about it. But I think that it's going to be something where ultimately by the end of the movie he can reboot him, and it wasn't that big of a deal. And yeah, that's the only death that I think will happen in this movie. I don't think any character is actually going to die and stay dead. That's my one theory there. I also could potentially say, I think every character in this scene is dead. Because I don't know how you live through that. I understand that they're wearing suits of armor, but, like, I don't think the suits of armor are doing all that. That's crazy. Every time I see that scene, it blows my mind. And then the scene where, like, he punches the guy and the guy's teeth all come out, I'm like, yeah, that guy has much worse than a concussion. That man is not going to be okay. That's a regular dude in there. But, yeah, obviously, I don't think any of them are going to die because this is a comic book movie. Superman could do stuff like that without actually killing or being, you know, fatal to the people that he's attacking. It's fine. It's whatever. And, yeah, so that being said, that's pretty much everything I wanted to predict here. The one last prediction that I do have, I think that the kaiju fight with Superman, I'm guessing that's the opening scene. That's my guess. That's my speculation. That's something I'm going to, you know, That's something I'm going to put my stamp of approval on. But yeah, that being said, that's pretty much everything I wanted to say in this video. So thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. And if you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow, bow, bow.